So today would not have happened if Carmen Anderson had not said, sure, bring a couple of people over and we'll talk about what we could do differently about disability, which led directly to today. Everything important has always started with one person saying yes. Sometimes it's a person with structural authority, it's the president of something, it's the director of something, but many times it's the internal champion who won't give up. On July 26, 1990, President George Bush Sr. signed the Americans with Disabilities Act and said, let the shameful walls of exclusion finally come tumbling down. And we have spent today talking about the ways that it has and the ways that it has not. And so we want to spend the next few minutes going back through today's packed agenda, remind us all of the amazing things that have happened, and then talk about what happens next, what we're going to do, and what we hope you will do. So.
Terrific. So it really has been an amazing day. We started talking about those of us who were gathered in this room, and we really are an eclectic mix of experts and people with lived experience who we heard so much about today, being critical to be in the room, and then those of us who really know very little but are not ashamed to admit it. And so that mix of expertise and talent and will has brought us to this moment, and we hope that it was worth your time. Josie and Chaz started us out this morning with helping us think about just Disability 101, and each of us captured just a couple of points from each speaker that we wanted to share with you. For me, the key takeaway, there were many, I made lots and lots of notes, but the notion simply to think about people as assets, not think about, which is something we struggle with so much in our society, looking at what's wrong with somebody or what's missing or what's lacking, but how it will change our view of the world if we begin to think about all people as people with assets, and also think about the creative abilities and talents that they bring to the table, and that in turn, we owe it to them not to use a one-size-fits-all mentality.
Mm-hmm. And the things I wrote down were disability is the largest minority group in the world. And as a personal aside, in the Disability 101 tips in your program, just wanted to point out, after today, never ever, under any circumstances, say handicapped ever again. If you're tempted to say handicapped, say accessible. It works. Accessible restroom, accessible parking, language. Sometimes can feel like a small thing, but it reflects what we believe and what we value. So next we heard from Grant and Darren. One of the things that I wrote down from there is the importance of having people with disabilities in positions of power at the table, that if there are leaders with lived experience at the table, Darren said, we don't need the disability PowerPoint. It's lived in the room.
I captured that same point, but I also thought in terms of practical next steps, he talked about doing an actual audit of where you are. Be clear about where you are as a starting point. And then he said so beautifully, we won't be a just nation until everyone is included in the circle. And I thought that was profound as well.
Mm-hmm. I also liked justice is always contested. We cannot take for granted that we're building on what happened yesterday, that at any point we can go back to zero. And so it requires continued attention and stewardship. Then we heard from our fabulous arts panel.
Yes, and they were amazing, and it was a proud moment for me. I'm not in that space, but I was so proud that we are a national leader in arts accessibility and innovation and universal design, and how powerful that is and the statement it makes for our community as well as the nation.
And I want to just acknowledge they had to cut many things from the presentation. One important point behind the success of the arts community is our regional asset district, who made it a condition of funding that thou shalt have a point person on disability inclusion, and you shall do an audit and you shall work on this. And so having somebody inside who was the point person to become the expert or to find out the answer if you don't know the answer was really transformative in our community.
Absolutely.
And then Paul O'Hanlon took us through disability history, the incredible power and role of institutions. I wrote down, people live their whole lives in institutions not that many years ago. That could have been me. And reminded us that it seems to be a reflexive instinct to people who are new into this space, that the first thing we should do is build a new special place and special program targeted just for the needs of people with disabilities. Please do not do that. That institutions are founded on people with very good intentions, very well-meaning, and that things that can start with good intentions can become big challenges and problems.
Yes. I also reflected on the horrific history that Paul shared, but I also made a note that we're making progress, but that progress was made because people demanded it, and how powerful that is, and that we cannot take that for granted. I also was taken by his comments about the rural community. I grew up in a rural community, so I understand that challenge and some of those needs. We have much work yet to be done.
Mm-hmm. Then we heard our short talks. So Thina reminded us of the incredible inequities that happen in our school, that we can try to be equitable in the front door, but if our students don't have the supports that they need and leave in handcuffs out the back door, what are we doing?
Yes. And I captured the notion that while we are addressing these dire situations that we currently face, we have an opportunity to transition those to locations of healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought that was an important note.
And then Ashley talked to us about healthcare access, how still 30 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act, very basic access cannot be taken for granted. And I am left with the mask image of, it was $1 mask idea that you could see somebody's face through the mask that was transformative. That was access for someone. It doesn't always have to be a giant capital campaign.
Yes.
Although sometimes it does.
It was encouraging to hear the commitment of a very large provider, service provider, employer, many roles that UPNC plays in our region, their commitment to inclusion. That's encouraging because you don't often hear at the systems level that type of inclusion.
Mm-hmm. And then Anne talked about the journey of the Children's Museum, and I remember the button about being kind, and how, in essence, it's how we treat people, how we see people, that is a culture of inclusion and access or not.
And I captured the exact same thing. Her comments around, yes, we can do all these things to the physical plant, but at the end of the day, how is it that you treat people? How do you interact? How do you cherish our children, since this is the Children's Museum?
Mm-hmm. And then Joyce brought us home talking about employment of people with disabilities. I remember that she said, it was Bill at Highmark who said yes, and that one yes has had ripple effects that have had global impact in the work of Bender Consulting, in the work of numerous corporations. She referred to the Disability Equality Index, which we don't have time to talk about, but totally Google it. It's a best practice of global companies looking at a soup to nuts about practices of inclusion and getting scored. And we have in our country some companies who get 100%. And so we're making some movement.
Yes. Joyce is a force to be reckoned with in and of herself. I loved the notion of pity is arrogance. Very profound to me. And simply, people want to work, they're prepared to work, hire them.
And then we had some fabulous videos, which, can we have a round of applause for our great videos again? And then my biggest takeaway from Jennifer's presentation is, as nonprofits, as community leaders, as foundations, we talk the talk, but there's gaps in walking the walk, which brings us to what we want to talk about next. Is that the clicker? Oh, awesome. Let's see if it works. It does. So that brings us to what happens next.
What happens next? So, as we said it this morning, we really do see this as a launching point. We don't expect the endowments to totally transform, or your organizations, those of you who are at a sort of early stage as we are, but we do anticipate that you would join us as we join FISA and others who have been long-term committed to this agenda to help us move forward. And so we have a set of activities that we hope to carry out over the next several months, including some opportunities for further education. And you want to talk about the website?
Yes.
Because this is
so
exciting
today, right this second, on your phone, you can go to disabilityinclusionpgh.org, which has all the great videos from today. And on our events page, it will talk about a series of upcoming webinars. Bender Consulting, which provides technical assistance to global companies, has agreed to work with us on a series of very practical webinars. So if you want your whole staff to better understand the Disability 101, there'll be an hour-long webinar for that. There'll be a webinar about how do you know if your website is accessible? What does that mean? And what might you do about it? There'll be a webinar on how do you make sure your social media is accessible to people with disabilities. There's a webinar on creating accessible documents and reports. A webinar on if you're hosting a meeting or hosting an event, how do you make sure it's accessible? Very concrete, walk you through. If you cannot wait until January when these launch, under resources on Disability Inclusion PGH is already today the handbook from the Chicago Community Trust, which is a comprehensive guide, and many fact sheets and very easy to use handouts.
So we are also planning to launch, we are developing right now, an RFP so that we can put funds in the hands of organizations who want to make small changes soon. So we hope in the next several months, certainly by early spring, to have the small grants program for this initiative moving forward, grants up to $20,000, so that people who want to make targeted changes, particularly in the areas that we've discussed and that Kristy has highlighted in terms of other areas where additional expertise will be available, we hope to have those grants available to you. It will not be through the endowment's normal grant cycle or grants process. We hope to have a streamlined RFP, a streamlined process, a streamlined timeline, and we will use a panel of folks who, as we heard, best practice, know the issues, understand what makes a difference to help us think about how to select those grantees going forward.
So that's what we're going to do. What we ask is, before you leave here today, think about what your next step is. Everybody in this room is starting from a different place, and we all have more that we can do. And so,
yes, as we also heard as best practice, try to, if you can, identify somebody in your organization who will make this their priority. It's important that the organization as a whole owns these processes, but we have a lot of competing interests and activities and areas of focus. It is easy for something that is critical to get lost. And so if we have somebody designated as the contact, they can be the one to, spearhead the funding process, the additional education opportunities, the connection to resources in the organization, and maybe the networking opportunities that will be available. So we think it's an important step and will make a big difference to keep the agenda moving forward.
if it's not somebody's job, it's nobody's job. The next thing that we ask you to do is look at what you put out to your staff and board and the public about what you believe and who you serve, especially if you have statements that are about inclusion or diversity. Make sure that those include overtly people with disabilities.
And as we've already asked, we really do need you to participate. We said earlier, everyone has said, no real movement happens in isolation. Yes, one person can lead, one person can start the movement, but we need everybody. We need everybody because this impacts all of us. And to get to where we hope to ultimately be fully inclusive and a thriving region, we hope that we won't just say, we're going to focus over here and not over here, but that we really do think holistically about what our communities need and what our families and children need and what our organizations need to move forward. So please commit, participate, and be willing to start even if the change is very, very small.
We encourage you to start with some kind of internal assessment. There are tools that are on the website. But we wanted to not walk into this too prescriptive about what the technical assistance and next steps would be. And so if you have thoughts about the help that you need at your organization, please write them on the evaluation that Donna is going to send to you tonight or tomorrow, real soon. Write your feedback about today, but also if there are specific ways that we can help you that are outside of what we've already talked about, we want to hear them. We want to be partners with you in us all moving forward.
And then finally, and this really is sort of the end of our portion, it is a reminder again to commit to do something. We've talked about the possibilities. There are others that you can take, steps that you can take and so forth, but please commit to do something. We thank you so much for committing this day to this agenda. It has certainly made a difference for us. We are gratified that you would be here. And give of yourselves so freely, and we thank you for that. But please commit to do something moving forward.
And now, to take us home today, we want to invite Chaz and Josie back to the stage. Thank you for being here, for spending the whole day on this, and we'll look forward to their closing comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm assuming that if you guys are all still here, you drank the disability Kool-Aid. And you now, I hope, also agree how important this work is. I don't think that you could leave here and not believe that the effects on our children in the pipeline to prison or education or employment don't matter. Because we just heard from the experts that disability is affecting the outcomes of our population and people that can be making a difference. And so that's why we're all here, because we know all of you can make that difference.
I want to take a moment to simply say thank you to you. You all committed your day to learn, to have conversations, to learn from experts about very, very important topics across the disability conversation. So thank you to you. Thank you for your commitment, your loyalty, your support, and really, really, really appreciate it as a member of this community, as a member of this overall Pittsburgh community. I just wanted to take a moment to simply say thank you. We know that there's lots of work to be done. We challenge you to take it step by step or push by push as you do that work. But know that you have a support system, a variety of resources, a variety of people that are here to help you, to help your institutions, to help your families, our families do this work together and continue to grow this work together.
So I want us to think about next steps. I want us to start thinking, okay, we just heard that there's going to be some really great webinars, and I'm excited to listen to those. We have some possibilities for some funding that might be coming up, and those are amazing resources because I want to show that Kristy and Carmen walked the walk. We went to an event a year and a half ago that Darren held on this topic, and he said, go do something with this. And they sure did. And so if they were able to lead that event and make this possible, then you all have the ability to take this and do something else just as wonderful. So as part of this, and this might not be in our on our booklet, but we want you to, at your table, take 3 minutes and tell someone near you, or if you have to move to a table, what is your next step going to be to ensure that people with disabilities are not only served, but have a voice at your organization. 3 minutes.
So sorry to keep you on a time crunch here. Thank you for that discussion and having those conversations.
Yes. So I heard some wonderful little snippets of conversations about booklets and websites, and that is all wonderful, and that is exactly what we want to hear. And over, you've heard about how the motto, nothing about us without us, and how we should be making decisions about our lives and helping you all to support you to provide services. But we just as much need allies, people without disabilities who are bringing us into the conversation. Those allies are what brought us here today and have empowered us throughout our lives. So whether you have a disability or not, you play a vital role in making this happen.
So to conclude, we want to make sure that we highlight a few things. First, can I have another round of applause for Carmen and Kristy for bringing us all together? Phenomenal members of the community, phenomenal leaders and allies and advocates in this work. As mentioned, the website is something we definitely want to encourage you to check out several times. Now, I'm going to keep it real with everyone this afternoon. We've all been to conferences, seminars. What happens after traditionally, we go back to our desk, this wonderful brochure, the notes we've taken, gets added to the pile of stuff, right? So I personally today am asking you that this booklet, the resource that was shared, not go to that pile of stuff. Make it a priority and a resource that you continuously will go visit, revisit, and pass along to colleagues within your agencies, okay? We all know that happens, and it happened to me, probably happened to you before, but I'm committing myself to make sure I share these resources and continuously visit this resource and resources on. There's also on the screen there, you probably have seen throughout the day, it's on your program as well, the hashtag Disability Inclusion PGH. That's a great resource for you to share photos and other lessons learned.
Oh, how amazing the MCs have been, obviously.
Totally lost my train of thought, but thanks, Josie, for that. No, but I also think that hashtag can also be a source to kind of have a dialogue or conversation, right? Yeah. Josie and I talked about that. We're going to, over the next couple of weeks, check that hashtag to see what sorts of questions or concerns may come up and what sort of conversation piece we can use via social media to support each other, continuously build that network of support. What makes me so proud of Pittsburgh is that network. My roots are deep here, and I appreciate the support from each person that's impacted and touched my life along the way. And that resource is here for all of you, regardless of where you are in your learning process or your process with regards to disability. So hopefully that hashtag can be another resource or tool to do just that.
So on that note, thank you all so very, very much for joining us today. Thank you to Heinz and FISA, to Darren Walker for coming in, to Jennifer, and all of our speakers and videos and filmmakers and everyone that made this possible. We are going to actually let you out 10 minutes early. That's our little present to you guys. But I hope this is not the end of the conversation, and we look forward to speaking with all you soon. Thank you all.
Safe travels to the First Nation. Thank you.